Welcome to the Intercut Podcast, the weekly show going over the TV, movies, and entertainment that people can't cut away from. I am your co-host, Zachary Shevich, and joining me, my wife, it's Arturo Zurita.
Both of our partners are going to be very... I wonder if they even listen to our podcast after listening to us throughout the entire week, but I think we could get away with that one. No, I'm excited. Yeah, we got some Borat news to talk about, as well as a bunch of other movies that we've been catching up. Yo, just wrapped up. We counted it. 70-something movies off of St. Louis. I don't even want to look back at what we ended up with Chicago. There's been a lot of movies, but hey, I've been thankful that we've at least had an opportunity to continue to still, I guess, vast in the cinema, just not in the cinema. But yeah.
Yeah, the cinema has come to the home with all these virtual film festivals. It's been a productive time if your productivity includes watching lots of movies, as Art and I try to do, but a lot of really interesting films, some of them being nominated as their country's selection for Best Foreign Language Film for the Oscars, some of them getting recognition from the IDA Awards or the Gotham Awards or the Critics' Choice Awards, a bunch of stuff developing as we head into award season. So it's an exciting time to be watching movies and talking about movies. We got a bunch to discuss from Doc NYC, as well as some others. So in a little bit, we're going to talk about all of that, as well as Wonder Woman 1984, Black Panther 2, and Netflix. But first, make sure you're subscribed to the Intercut Podcast, either the video podcast on youtube.com/intercutpod or the audio podcast available on most podcatchers. Also, follow Intercut on social media, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. We are at Intercut Pod. That's at Intercut Pod. That's short for podcast. And remember, drop us a 5-star review on the Apple Podcast iTunes review area. We really appreciate that. It helps the show grow a lot. Shout out to Meg Sparrow, who said, "My favorite film podcast. I absolutely love this podcast. Since I've started listening, I've gotten into film a lot more, and it's been super fun. You guys always facilitate really interesting conversations, and I'm always excited for the next episode." Thank you, Meg. We're excited to have you with us. Again, leave us that 5-star review. We really, really appreciate that. But Art, let's start the show the way we started every week here with what we are watching. What you been watching?
I know we have a couple of virtual links for some narratives, but let's start with the doc stuff, because they've been rolling out with a bunch of good things. Have you been able to catch Belushi?
No, I haven't. Did you see Belushi?
Not yet, but I also wanted to mention one that if you don't have Showtime, you'll be able to catch it on this list as well. That's one of the ones that I've been looking forward to. We did catch, though, Chasing Childhood, which is also on this Dear 70 list. So if you want to talk a little bit more about that one right there.
Yeah, that's one that we haven't had a chance to talk about at all, I think, on Intercut yet. And it's a very interesting documentary. One that definitely was a bit frustrating to watch because I think, as people who have grown up in the age of parental over-involvement, some of this might feel familiar either to your own life or to people you know's lives. But Chasing Childhood is this documentary that talks a little bit about how the ways in which parenting and parenting culture has evolved has deprived a lot of kids of the pleasures of childhood, the unstructured play, and the freedom of movement and freedom of advancing responsibilities, and the kinds of effects it's having on children and communities, whether that's increased stress or increased anxiety. I thought it was a really fascinating look at the way in which parenting has become this overbearing element in a lot of people's lives. I don't know. What you thought of the documentary?
I'm not a big fan of helicopter parents. I have been around helicopter parents even when I've taught at some schools as a parapro as well. But I thought it was a very interesting look at it, and that idea that, there just continues to be more after-school activities that, growing up, I saw that 3:15 on the clock. I was ready to get out. They don't see that anymore because it's just more and more and more and more stuff. But it was a very fascinating look at how parents just see their kids as investments, And there's been a lot of narratives that have also covered that aspect of it, and where they are investing into their future through their child, right? I really like one of the anecdotes that they brought up. There was a woman named Lenora Skenazy, I believe is how you pronounce her name, and her article about why I let my 9-year-old ride the subway. And she was like, I was just a writer. I pitched this. went everywhere, and she was on all these talk shows where they grilled her for being a bad parent, for allowing any type of that space. So it's definitely one of those docs that I'm sure if a helicopter parent watched it, they're just gonna be like, oh, but I don't know about that. Why would you let your kid do that? And it almost kind of shows the divisiveness that we have right now in the country, where a lot of people are like, no, your kid needs to be protected from everything. No, your kid needs to be rolling around in the dirt so that they're not as prone to all these infections and stuff. But the one thing I wish they covered a little bit more is that they focus a lot, and they even say the line, this isn't just happening to wealthy families who have the ability to put their kids in all of these extracurricular activities. It's happening to, middle-class families. But I wish they covered it because it's more than that. It's deeper than that, Yeah. It's also just like social media and how much that's taken away from living as a kid and not being embarrassed about anything, because now everybody watches everything you do. And then there's the other aspect of it, which is not so much extracurricular activities, but just getting a job to be able to support your family. But nonetheless, very interesting documentary that is also available here.
Yeah, it definitely takes place from a somewhat privileged perspective, and even though it brushes up on that subject, it could dive a lot deeper into that, because I think the issues that it is discussing are issues that are felt beyond upper middle class parents. Yet I think a lot of the causes that they're talking about, whether that's like after school piano or whatever it is, are more rooted in one specific point of view. It's a very like Connecticut based movie documentary,
which isn't bad. But once you get to the virtual class side of it, that affects everybody. And I think that this doc definitely, if it had a chance to edit one more thing in there, they would have been like, and virtual classes did not help.
It is a little bit hard, I think, for us to maybe judge as non-parents. But I do think, like, you see these things happen in the real world, and they are frustrating, maybe from your own perspective. Like, I know the things that I enjoyed about childhood, or the things that maybe I wanted to enjoy more about childhood. There's certainly a lot of elements working against children getting that type of childhood experience now that are addressed in this documentary. Not a very rivetingly structured documentary, but a fascinating subject that's covered pretty interestingly.
For sure. A couple of the other ones that I was looking forward to was The Dissident, which I know is playing there, Hamtramck USA, but The Dilemma of Desire, I want to talk about really quickly because I saw this one popping up. Fantastic poster. Got to catch this one over at SLIF, which I hope they rename to just St. Louis International Film Festival. This one was really cool because it pretty much just talks about how the female gaze, but more so how the desire of sexuality is very much limited in movies, in just the way people talk to each other. It's in the music we listen to, more on the male side of things and less on the female side of things. And I thought it was a very interesting look at the effects of what we saw this year. We had a really big #1 rap song that came out that a lot of people protested, when ironically you have a lot of other songs that talk about, very similar sexual issues, but it was never up at the forefront. And I think they like dive into the culture of vibrators and who originally made vibrators and stuff. It's definitely not one to catch with the family, but I still think it's one that's interesting because it does affect you once you reach that age, not wanting to teach your kids sexuality. Yeah, it goes again with the doc we just talked about. But at the same time, there's ramifications to that. And where you're saying boys are allowed to be boys, but girls may not be allowed to be what they can be. There's a lot more that I want to say about this, but without spoiling it too much, because I know this is like barely starting its run. Not too much out there about that one, but I would highly recommend that one and Finding Yingying, which we talked about earlier as well.
Yeah. That was one of your favorites from Chicago, I want to say.
If a movie can make you almost cry, the documentation of this case, I would highly recommend it. I mean, you could search up the entire case online as well, but it does a beautiful job at capturing Yingying's diary, which one of her classmates who documents the entire thing through her parents' perspective, she's able to incorporate that, and I think she did a really good job at telling your story.
Yeah. Gunda is another one that we've talked about on this before. Just an absolutely gorgeous film. The most beautiful black and white cinematography that you'll probably see this year. Telling through no dialogue at all, just the sound of hooves and pig snorts and stuff like that. The story of life on the farm for a series of animals, particularly this one mother pig and her piglets. It's a stunning piece of work. It is very slow moving and very intentionally paced in its way. But I think if you get into the rhythms of the movie, it's one of the most affecting pieces of film that I've seen all year.
Yeah, most people are going to say it's pretentious, for sure.
Yeah.
It's also pretty great. I was not expecting that ending in that final shot for something that has absolutely no dialogue, absolutely no score. They did not add any sound effects whatsoever. It is all caught on camera right there at that moment. And like you said, the way that they caught it in black and white, I think makes for some of the most beautiful shots. But that poster is absolutely stunning. Absolutely. And there's a message there for sure, without pounding over your head.
Yeah, I don't think it's over the top in its messaging. Some people have felt like it's propaganda. I don't think it's propaganda.
That's because they felt it, though. That's because they felt it. It's because they had just ordered a Big Mac.
Yeah. Look, there's like a minute-long shot in this film that very slowly creeps in on a cow's eye until you see like a single tear or whatever it is rolling down its face. If that sounds like something you want to invest your time into, then Gunda is going to be a movie for you. If not, then maybe
wait till Hulu. It's picked up by Neon.
Yeah. Another one of the really interesting documentaries that I saw at Doc NYC is Mayor. It's a movie about Musa Hadid, who is the mayor of Ramallah. It's a city in Palestine. And it's just a very interesting movie showing you kind of the day-to-day life of this bureaucratic employee. But he's facing this extreme circumstance in that he's in a nation which isn't officially recognized by the other nation that it's within, so funds aren't easy to come by, and there's constant disruptions from forces coming through or violence erupting, and seeing this guy who's so focused on opening this new fountain, which will be a beautiful fountain for people to come and see while there's a literal war raging around him, is just a fascinating juxtaposition. There's just some really jaw-dropping moments in the movie that you can't turn away from. And I don't think the documentary goes over the top in how it depicts them. It kind of is very verite, just sort of sitting there in the moment. Yeah, sometimes your attention is focused to the cameraman and how is this cameraman deciding how close to get to this violence, but like for the most part it's just showing you what day-to-day life is like in Ramallah and what it's like for these government officials who are a bit trapped in their jobs for various reasons. I thought this was one of the more fascinating documentaries I've seen recently.
Yeah, these festivals, we talked about City So Real, gave that one a big thumbs up. I know another one is City Hall, which, City So Real, Chicago. City Hall is Boston.
Yeah.
Those were 270 plus minutes. This one's only 90 minutes. So I've been on board with all of these documentaries, just kind of covering the ins and outs of the bureaucracy that goes on. One of the more interesting aspects of this one was when they're arguing in that one scene about like the license plates and the slogan for the town, because it's not just about the morals or the values behind it. It's actually marketing. It's like, this is the phrase you are going to see on the license plates on everything. And I just started thinking about like the ones in Illinois and the ones everywhere else, and you realize what really goes into it is there's a lot of marketing and business ethics that go into really creating a city or a town. And it's a pretty good one.
Yeah. And we'll just mention in brief MLK FBI. I think we've mentioned it already on 2 previous Intercut podcasts. It's a stunning documentary, really well made. Probably going to be nominated for an Oscar later this year, if not a bunch of other documentary awards. It tells the story of how the FBI came to investigate and wiretap Martin Luther King. So it's about a really important piece of history, U.S. history. There's just about no good reason to not watch this documentary if you're interested in documentary films.
I would pitch it as the weirdest romance I've ever seen between the director of one of the biggest organizations and one of the biggest social leaders of our time. And it comes out in 2021, like maybe not even January but February, so this is a perfect chance to catch it early, or maybe even catch it before the Academy Awards, because I'm not sure how the release will be, but very good doc.
Yeah. So a couple others that we wanted to mention in brief from Doc NYC that are not part of the Doc NYC All Access, unfortunately. Let's start with In Silico, which is a pretty fascinating documentary that depicts 10 years in the development of this organization. What is it, Blue Brain?
Yeah, Blue Brain Project by neuroscientist Henry Markram.
Yeah, what did you think about In Silico?
Well, he said it was like 10 years, and I know at a certain point in the documentary, he's like, technically it's even longer because of the way that they were getting funding and when it started and stuff. We've been loaded this year with everything dealing from social media and AI to how big business is using AI to the coded biases that may be in the algorithms. If you are scared of technology, there is a slew of documentaries out there to help you with that. And this continues to kind of showcase what we're leading up to in terms of what science chooses to and not to fund.
Right.
Because while I mentioned all those movies, it reminded me a lot more. I don't know if you got the chance to see Spaceship Earth and how they were kind of creating their biosphere.
Not yet.
That was one from Sundance where a lot of people did not like what they were creating while they were, trying to make kind of like an Earth 2. Human Nature, which was about the CRISPR genome project and how the guy who's been really pushing that, right? He's like, yo, we can help people who have all of these muscular dystrophies or all these different things. And they're like, I don't know, you might recreate dinosaurs. So it's like, will he be alive to see it? This is a dude who in 10 years said he was going to recreate a brain.
Mm-hmm.
Spoiler alert, does not do that. But it comes from a very interesting director, which I know we've seen some of his previous work that came out this year also.
Yeah, so Noah Hutton is the director behind this. He directed a film called Lapsus, which I think you liked quite a bit, coming out of Fantasia Fest earlier this year. And this is something that he's been working on for, as we mentioned, 10 years. And he kind of puts himself in the center of it a little bit. It has a little of that Michael Moore-esque, I'm going to narrate and it's me talking. He doesn't put himself literally in the center of the frame that the way Michael Moore does. But I was questioning that approach at first, thinking, is this guy going to talk about how amazing it was that he was along the ride for this project? And then you see how he kind of gets caught between wanting to see the Blue Brain Project develop and hearing all of these outside criticisms that are very valid and ultimately some of them prove right. I think it's fascinating to see in the way that this documentary depicts how investment is moved towards different scientific endeavors and the way that people talk about their goals and what is achievable, what is not achievable versus what gets people on board to an idea. A lot of really interesting stuff that happens within his time frame.
Curious to see what he's got coming up next, because I could definitely see the stuff that he's learning in his documentaries being applied to the logic that I kind of saw in Lapses as well, with it being a very big company who use logistics to also get ahead of some things. So, yeah, pretty solid one.
Yeah. And then Mole Agent also played at Doc NYC. Is this one available on a streaming service already?
www.hulu.com. I'm acting like the Animaniacs, like I'm sponsored by them, but it is available on Hulu, and this one was a doozy.
Yeah, a really interesting movie. I think it's Chile's official selection for Best Foreign Language Film at the Oscars. So I don't know if it's really going to stand a chance at getting nominated, but it is a delightful documentary about this man who's essentially recruited by private investigators to be checked into an old folks home in order to monitor another one of the patients.
Yep.
And it plays out as this very quirky comedy. I mentioned on the LME live stream we did yesterday that it's kind of like if you had this premise directed by Taika Waititi, because he kind of becomes this beloved figure in the community. It's just a very interesting perspective for a documentary to take. What did you think about it?
Yeah, it begins like it's going to be super goofy. They got this man on with the glasses. They, what you see him in the poster with, even the magnifying glass has that. But really quickly, I think that switches to not being as quirky and all that, to kind of realizing the stuff that's going inside the nursing home. And I wasn't sure where they were going to take it. But it was, the aspects that they talk about loneliness. It's one of the early things that he brings up as well on why the main guy decides to do it to begin with. And I was like, oh, we're going to get heavy with some of the stuff here. The only thing about it, I would say, is they have him capturing stuff.
Right.
while the camera's capturing him capture stuff. And those are the only moments where it took me out. But again, it's on Hulu. I would highly recommend it. And it's been really cool to see a lot of these movies, be it documentaries, but especially the narratives. We had mentioned with the LME streams, also bringing up Some Kind of Heaven, on documenting and putting elderly people on film is not a bad thing. You have heard producers time and time again go, nobody wants to see that stuff. It's like there's a cutoff point and nobody wants to see them on screen. No, if you're not seeing them on screen, you're not seeing their stories. You're not seeing what they have to say, their emotions. And this one gets into the emotion sides of it. So yeah, I would recommend it over on Hulu.com.
Yeah. So a lot of really great selections from Doc NYC. Hopefully
plenty more.
See those or others. I know that I wanted to go see The Last Shot. I'll probably catch that within the next few days. So let us know if you count any of those movies or others from virtual film festivals. There are a few more movies that we wanted to hit in what we're watching. I wanted to mention Come Away very briefly, which I saw way back at Sundance. It's the new movie directed by Brenda Chapman, who at one point in time was the director of Brave before she was fired off that project.
Pixar?
Yeah.
Whoa.
And I believe she also was the director of The Prince of Egypt. So she's got a bit of a reputation here.
A classic. Okay. I have not seen this one, so tell me. Because I know there was like two Peter Pan stories that came out?
Two Peter Pan movies. Two made-for-kids Peter Pan movies that were both playing at Sundance earlier this year that I didn't like either.
The independent festival with the big studio funded. Yeah.
So there are some things that are fun about this movie. I think it has an imaginative eye, and the way in which Brenda sort of films play, how a stick will suddenly turn into a sword, and they'll move with it from imagination into reality. It's a weird comparison to make, but almost reminds me of Rugrats, in how Rugrats will have these vivid moments where the kids are imagining things, and then they'll remind you these are just babies and they're like in the corner of a room playing. I really liked that aspect of it. It's in the trying to bring in a real world drama around all of that, involving loaning money to debtors and like a secret family and stuff like that. I don't think that's what any kid would really enjoy about a movie like this, and it's not something that I enjoyed either. A lot of surprising actors in this one, though, like David Oyelowo, Angelina Jolie. Yeah, and so maybe it'll be for some people. I didn't really like it that much, even though there are things that I liked about it. Makes me curious to see what else Brenda Chapman wants to do, though, because it's interesting in the way that this plays with some fairy tale lore. It's got a little bit of Alice in Wonderland sprinkled in there, too. So
I was going to say, it sounds a lot like Poppins 2. When we went to go see Mary Poppins, the sequel, where it's like it's this magical world, but at the same time, a lot of it is like the debt we must play. And I was like, I don't think the kids care about this at all.
At all. Yeah.
But yeah.
Blumhouse released another movie into theaters, Freaky. I guess kind of is this like an intentional allusion to Freaky Friday? Because that's what it makes me think of.
The director, Christopher Landon, I don't know if you've seen his previous movies, but he did Happy Death Day. Happy Death Day to You. And I personally think he's done a decent job with it, because there are a lot of directors who clearly are coming in with homages, and they'll just pretend like, I suppose that's one of them. He's been pretty straightforward, so I'll give him that. He understands that Happy Death Day, it's his version of what's it called? Groundhog Day.
Right.
He straight up said when he got the script to this one, when the writer gave it to him, I believe he had a different type of name going on with it, and he was like, no, call it what it is. Freaky Friday the 13th, I believe, is what he said the actual name for this movie was when they were filming it. Then Disney went, nope. So they just called it Freaky. And I gotta give the man some respect, because he's like, well, the poster's gonna say Friday on it, so just put Freaky, keep the Friday on there. So I kind of respect it. But it 100% is. They said it's a mixture of Freaky Friday and Friday the 13th, and they wanted to combine the two of them. And, it reminds me of, I don't know if you remember movies like The Animal, The Hot Chick. It's that. It's that. And Freaky Friday and Friday the 13th. But
yeah, no, I mean, it's a pretty delightful body switching comedy, if I may say so. Like, I think Vince Vaughn is an actor who we haven't seen take a lot of really interesting film roles for maybe a decade. And here he's actually given kind of a great role in that he's the serial killer in this movie who switches places with a teenage girl. So Vince Vaughn is the one who has to act like a teenage girl throughout the film. And he plays it in this very kind of sincere, not over the top way that is very hilarious. And there are some pretty gory kills and satisfying, horrific moments throughout.
Surprisingly.
But for me, I kind of just found the comedy to be pretty delightful in terms of the awkward interactions with friends and family, the sudden, almost budding romance between Vince Vaughn and his mother, I guess, in the movie. And then of course, the moment in the back of the car. There's a lot of really funny bits throughout this film. I was just very entertained, much more than I expected to be from what could seem like a low-rent Blumhouse
For sure.
Redo of a familiar idea.
I think it would have done great in theaters, like we said. It was supposed to come out on Friday the 13th. That would have been a great push for this movie. It definitely has those laughs that with an audience hit way more. You had mentioned the kills because, again, it's a body swap movie with a teenage girl and a serial killer, and they do a great job with the kills. I think a lot of people are going to like the death counts that are going to be done with this one, but there are moments where they strive for things and they're able to accomplish a lot because they do a thing where when they swap, they still keep the pronouns of the person who was there, and I was like, they're doing this intentionally. And I saw an interview with the writer, and he was like, that's one of the things that I hope people notice. And while they do a great job with that, there are some corny scenes where I was like, y'all, the setup on this, it's not perfect. But again, I think if this one was playing in theaters, they would have done it would have been killer with it. And they're clearly working to make it a franchise.
I think I forgave some of the corniness because it's just so silly and the consequences are so thin in this movie. It's not asking to be taken seriously in any way whatsoever, I feel like. And I think ultimately I overlook stuff like that because that's just kind of the tone of the movie. Yeah, it's not the most hilarious or the most authentically written, but it's a good piece of entertainment.
Most of the jokes hit, and comparing it to Happy Death Day, I still think Happy Death Day is a bit better, but they have some theories on this sequel for this about who they're going to bring in, maybe some family members, and they've been throwing out Charlize Theron's name. I'm there.
Yeah.
Virtually or in theaters, I'm there.
Absolutely. This is actually one that I think is only available in theaters right now. And it's interesting because it's a Universal Pictures movie. As we know, Universal has struck that deal with AMC that they can bring some movies to VOD early. So we'll see.
Because we got to screen a link.
13th. Yeah.
So it's possible.
They're ready to dole them out virtually. Blumhouse, I wonder what's going to happen.
Blumhouse has always been a person who's been forward on that as well. And they've made deals since the past. And those deals that they said absolutely no to in 2014, 15, and 16, they're going, let me see those deals again. Let me see if we can work something out. But pretty solid one.
Did you catch The Life Ahead?
Yes, I did, which I know we talked a little bit about on LME streams as well.
The Life Ahead is an interesting movie from Netflix. It's an Italian film directed by Edoardo Ponti, who is the son of Sophia Loren. This movie also stars Sophia Loren. It's like her first movie in maybe 10 years or something like that. Yeah, a while. And interesting to see her take on this role. She plays a former prostitute as well as a survivor of the Holocaust who kind of provides childcare for different working women in her neighborhood. So she ends up as the default mother for a lot of kids who are either forgotten about or just don't have the family structure around them to be properly supported. And so she's asked to take in this other boy by someone close to her. And that other boy, played by Ibrahima Gueye, is a bit of a troublemaker. He's involved in some street crime. And they, of course, have this oppositional relationship when he first comes to live with her. But as is the case with a lot of these, adoption or savior movies, they come to become close to one another and have a love for each other. And ultimately, I think where this movie succeeds, where some of those other ones don't, is in the performances, which are really, really good. Sophia Loren is very captivating throughout this movie. You kind of believe that antagonistic nature they have at the beginning, and you grow to see why they would grow to care for one another. So I think it's done well in the writing and in the acting here. It's a pretty satisfying, albeit somewhat stereotypical and cliched movie.
You think it has any potential?
The main reason that I think a lot of people have been talking about is people think she might be in line for Best Actress.
And let's keep
Oscar.
it a buck. When they send you the stuff, they're already sending it to you with the consideration of. So, yeah.
Right.
But
so I think there's a chance. I mean, look, if I think this movie starred some other actress, I don't know if that's the case. There is a lot of hype around it being a Sophia Loren role, and we don't get a lot of those. So she gets a bit of a bump just by being a legend. She probably deserves that bump. I don't know. I could see it getting a nomination. I don't think I could see it winning.
Okay.
Ultimately, I don't think it's going to be one of the final 5 performances.
it'll be interesting. But yeah, I love what the director said. He's like, if your mama's the best actor and you're a director, cast your mama.
Yeah. Any other movies we should hit before the yay or nays?
Yeah, we got 2 quick ones that I think were really high on both of our lists. The Climb and the Nest.
Yeah, so The Climb is a really interesting film. It first premiered at Cannes in 2019, went on to get a lot of hype at the Telluride Film Festival last year, and then it was at Sundance earlier this year, which is where I caught it. A lot of people, it was supposed to come out in theaters early in, I think, May, but got pushed all the way back to November. I'm glad it's finally out because it's a really delightful little buddy comedy that takes place over the course of several years. It's got a very interesting production style to it in that it has a lot of these long one shots. My spiciest take was going to be that because I'd seen these 2 films at similar times, I was more impressed by the long take cinematography in The Climb than I was in 1917. Ooh. So maybe a little too spicy.
Release it. Clean out the drafts.
Just because, this is such a lower budgeted movie, such a more humble in its ambitions project, yet it has these really bravura moments, particularly that opening, which takes place following the 2 guys on a bicycle trip or on a bicycle ride, like up and down a mountain. And the way in which they're able to coordinate not just the camera work to keep them both in it, but the performances, because like how close one another are on the bicycles is like key to the performance of this movie too. I just think there's so many aspects of it that are so well done. Plus it's quite funny in parts and tells you a really interesting story of this kind of toxic friendship between these guys who are in each other's lives mainly because they've been in each other's lives for so long. I think there's a lot to like about The Climb. I thought this one was delightful.
Yeah, I really like this one too. What you were saying about like it feeling like a toxic relationship, and then the more you just watch it, you're like, how many of these people do you have in your life? And it's because they do a great job as they advance it, because originally it was a short, which is the beginning of the movie. And you're mentioning like how they filmed it in the long takes of going up. They were talking about how they like what was carrying up the camera uphill. They were like kind of screwed with it because I think something happened to the jib, but then at the same time, the performance wise, you have a long take and it's uphill. There is an actual performance, physical performance happening, having to go up.
I think I heard an interview where one of them said that he was having trouble getting up the hill for the short film.
How could you not? Yeah, but it was fantastic to see how they were able to take a short film. I believe they submitted it to Sundance. They were able to make it something bigger. It did the round, so now that it's out and picked up by Sony Pictures Classic, which is not a bad studio to pick you up, they got something because I believe they both wrote it. One of them directed it. They start throughout the entire movie. And also shout out, I kept looking at her and I had no idea, why does she look so familiar? I kept saying, Marissa, played by Gail Rankin. I was like, why does she look so
Shout out to the Glowcast.
Oh my goodness. Sometimes you take for granted how good a performance is until you see them perform in something else and you go, yo, these are 2 completely different people. So shout out to her. She did a fantastic job. But in terms of the script, I had mentioned in the LME streams, they do a good job. I think she's the best performance. They do a good job. But their script is so much more powerful. Like you said, the comedy, I think, works well because they're not so invested in making you laugh right away. I think a lot of the jokes, the more that I think about it and seeing some of the clips after the fact, because I can't wait to watch this one again, it hits better the second time around. And you're really there trying to follow along with the characters because they have a couple of time jumps. And again, the least, we're saying very, very, very little about this, but the more blind you go into this, the better. Because there's a lot of ambiguity. And a lot of movies do that where they make you pay for a ticket, then you ask a question, and you're like, well, no, I deserve to know the answer to this question. They leave it there for you to fill in the blanks. And I mean this as someone who's very big on how ambiguity is used. They use it several times, be it how a certain family feels about a character, be it the ending. It's almost a Rorschach test, I want to say. I was looking up what who people were siding with, and they were siding with different people. And at first I was like, how? And it's kind of like that Marriage Story thing, you know, either you hate them both or you're siding with one over the other. Maybe you're even siding with the parents. Maybe it's just
who you identify with.
That's the sign of a great movie. And I loved watching it. It was a great experience watching it because I knew very little about it. And every step of the way, I found it to be very fascinating, and I can't wait to rewatch it again.
Yeah, definitely. When you mentioned the performances, could have been funnier if it was the movie starring like Seth Rogen and James Franco or something like that. I think there is like a quality that it's lended by not really knowing who these guys are and maybe believing a little bit more that these are the actual friends. You know,
it reminds me of Moorhead and Benson a little bit when they write their stuff and they star in it as well. You know, there's that little extra specialness to it.
Right. Like it maybe if they're not selling it in their performances, they're selling it in the authenticity of it, right?
Exactly. Especially because a big part of it, you know, if you want to call it a bromance or whatever it is, there is that side of it where it's like these are people who know each other, and you're kind of getting without spoiling too much. You are used to having friendships that don't just define like an acquaintance. They define someone who knows so much about you that you're not just getting rid of a friendship, you would be getting rid of somebody who knows so much about you. So there's sometimes more weight to a friendship than there is with like an actual relationship, and that's what the movie covers so well.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely have friendships like that, and I feel like most people probably have some. So
it's ride or die. You're not going anywhere.
Yeah. So I would definitely recommend, if you've got a friend who's been in your life for such a long time that you're not even sure why anymore,
sit them down and have a discussion afterwards about why. And sticking to the relationship side of it, The Nest, a new movie. By Sean Durkin.
Yeah, Sean Durkin, who 10 years ago gave us Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene. I think one of the best psychological horror thrillers that I've seen. I love the way that movie plays with your head. This is maybe a little bit less of an ambiguous, haunting movie, but it's got its own unsettled nature to it. It's about this married couple who lives in America and decides to move to England for new opportunities for the man, played by Jude Law, leaving Carrie Coon as the mother of two children, kind of unsettled in her new environment as this family tries to fill out this oversized home that is not for them, and that has left them kind of stranded in a sense in a new country. I think this movie is really interesting look at this marriage that is dissolving in a way. It feels like they're entering a haunted house in the way that Durkin depicts how this relationship evolves. And I think the performances both from Jude Law and Carrie Coon do such a good job at articulating that underlying resentment and that those needs that those characters feel. Jude Law being somebody who always his character always wants a little bit more than he has. Carrie Coon being so frustrated at her family but trying to be the mother that she's supposed to be. I thought there was a lot to really like about this movie. What did you think?
I want to rewatch it again, and again, and I need to rewatch Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene, because while I thought it was good, you watch this and you're like, no, I missed out on the great over there. The performances, like you said, absolutely fantastic. Carrie Coon deserves a nomination. Jude Law, don't sleep on him, deserves a nomination. But like you said, while it's covering a family like kind of, being disjointed, where half of them are American, because the daughter... Well, never mind. I don't want to talk spoilers. The behind the scenes to it is that Sean Durkin himself was moving back and forth between America and the UK, and you can definitely tell that he may or may not be the kid in the movie, but it's definitely based a lot on his experiences with what was going on with his mom, what was going on with his father, and just that idea of how he kind of got the American spirit over here and wanted to bring that back to the UK at a time where when he was a kid in the 80s, he may have had that opportunity. And they build these characters so well because he does a great job at dividing both of them. And you're kind of seeing both of their perspectives. And there's like... there'll be a dinner scene at the beginning where one of them is winning the conversation, and then there'll be another dinner scene in the second half where the tables may have turned. And I've heard a lot of people say that they feel the movie doesn't go anywhere, but I feel it goes at a lot of places at once because it's covering a real family. And many times a lot of those things, a lot of the troubles are unspoken, but you're seeing it on screen and what they're going through. Like you had mentioned, while they're following everything for him and his business, she also has a horse training business. And by the way, the horse that she has is actually he has his own IMDb page. I was like, yo, this is the Jon Snow's horse. So great acting, great performance. Nominate that fool too.
Best
above them. Best
cinema horse. Yeah,
definitely. And there's some visually striking scenes. There's just, when you see a horse perform, especially the way it performs in this movie, it adds to that as well. So on all cylinders, I thought it was a great family drama that, again, makes you want to go back to Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene and look at all those little details. I implore people to watch this one. From the performances for sure, but I think that there's a lot in the story that at first viewing, maybe you don't relate to it right away, but I think on a second watch, you definitely see like the little cracks that are happening in the family and whether they want to hold on to it, whether it's worth holding on to it or not. Fascinating characters.
Absolutely. And without spoiling anything that happens at the end, whereas Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene has a ambiguous ending, I think intentionally so, to kind of leave you unsure what's going on, I'd say The Nest has an unsettled ending, which is something different in that there are things that haven't been solved, but it leaves you in a place where you kind of firmly know where you are with these characters and this family. And I think it's a pretty brave ending that might not be satisfying to everybody, but is appropriate for, I think, this type of story. It's one that I really do want to rewatch because I haven't caught it since I watched it back at Sundance. I actually wrote a review for Time Out that I'll leave in the description below.
I was about to say, you should be a Rotten Tomatoes critic with the way you wrapped up that ending. The ending is fantastic. Like, I'm either getting older, but I thought the ending was so good. Two other notes. You know who the cinematographer was?
Tell me.
Cinematographer of Son of Saul.
Right, yeah.
Right? Composer. Do you know who the composer was?
No, tell me.
Lead singer of Arcade Fire. So it's like just the people who Sean Durkin is working with, where he has been producing. I know that there's been that decade-long, if you want to call it a hiatus, but I believe he did some television. The stuff he has been producing and the people who this man has been working with, he is building a team. So I really like to see the behind the scenes on how he's just building up his creative workforce practically. So shout out to him. Shout out to the movie and everyone involved.
Director who definitely takes his time, but he's coming back very intentionally, Yeah. All right, so that's what we've been watching. Let us know what you've been watching in the comments on YouTube or by shooting us an email. The address for that is intercutpod@gmail.com. Let us move on to the Yay or Nay, where we break down the latest happenings in entertainment, starting with one by one. The anticipated blockbuster releases of 2020 have been pushed from this year to next, leaving little left on the calendar. But the last movie standing is Wonder Woman 1984, which Warner Brothers just announced will, despite surging COVID numbers all across the United States, be released in theaters on December 25th. However, it will also simultaneously be released on HBO Max for viewers to stream from the comfort of their own homes. That's how I'm going to watch it. That's how Art's going to watch it, I'm sure. This is a huge boon for HBO Max, whose membership numbers are currently below expectation. Art, yay or nay, the Wonder Woman 1984 release is going to convince a lot of people to sign up for HBO Max.
Yay. And contrary to belief, I'm taking my HBO subscription, going to my local Cinemark and telling them to plug it in. No, definitely. There have been a lot of people who have been speculating that Soul, which is $150 million, it's like, well, there's no Mulan price tag on that, so this must be one where you are pushing it to be, a subscriber baiter, practically. Right. HBO's got, they said it was... Someone said it was 200 minutes of unseen footage for Snyder Cut. Great. Well, that's not coming out yet. So what's the next DC thing they got? I told my sister about this. She's been excited to see Wonder Woman. So for that alone, it is a big up, big up, big up. I heard that there was a limit for it, though. I heard that by January, it's going to premiere December 25th, but they're going to take it out of the streaming service sometime in January. That may just be speculation, but something to note there as well. But like you said, it's also going to be playing in theaters, so I'm very curious to see how they're just going to rattle the numbers, the business side of it. We also know that, what are they going to take out of it, and whatever info they get out of this, how will that affect future releases, especially because there'll still be snow in January and February. So I don't know. We'll see. But I'm excited for it because I got a nice big screen at home. My family doesn't go anywhere because we want to make sure we get to see each other. So it's the best release possible for a movie that we didn't think we were going to get till next year.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting to note that this probably is going to be the most watched thing that HBO Max has had yet, at least until we get that Friends reunion or the Snyder Cut. This is kind of the thing that will draw the most eyeballs, and probably feels like the thing that's most likely to get somebody who hasn't yet signed up for HBO Max to be like, well, I could either pay the full price to see it in a movie theater, or I can pay about the same to get a month of HBO Max. And, they're hoping that it's going to be like the people who signed up for Game of Thrones and never left. I think it's going to be a big boon for the service. I don't know if it's going to be a hit on the level of something like Hamilton, which has a little bit more wide appeal, I think. But it's not like Wonder Woman has a small market. It's a pretty big market,
like you say. Hamilton had a big market as well for people who couldn't afford to go see it. And for $6.99, are you kidding me? You could have Alina and I did the math. You could have 4 years of Disney Plus equals one Hamilton ticket in the back.
Right.
So yeah, Wonder Woman, to be able to have that in the comfort of your own home, I hope it does well.
Same,
but we'll see.
Yeah. Marvel announced that the sequel to Black Panther will begin production in July 2021 after confirming that the studio will neither recast the King T'Challa role nor will they digitally recreate the late Chadwick Boseman. Speculation has pointed to Letitia Wright's character, Shuri, taking on the protagonist's role moving forward. Art, yay or nay, centering Shuri in Black Panther 2 is the right move?
I'd say so because they had mentioned building her up, and I know a lot of pushback was like, no, we want to continue seeing Black Panther. But the decision to not CGI him, to not do a Leia, I think it's way better. And you have the opportunity to now build up her character and even other characters that are there from Wakanda, because they were stepping him up to be a big part of the Avengers post. I was actually going to stop spoilers there. Post Iron Man. I was like, I actually checked myself there for a second.
What if somebody hasn't seen it yet?
What if someone has not seen this movie? Yeah, so, a lot of money is obviously involved, so they're just trying to curate who's going to be the one to lead. One of the biggest solo ones, only Iron Man 3 was able to get the numbers that Black Panther was able to get. But I do think they have a very fleshed out cast. Let's talk about that. M'Baku and even the people who may have, I feel people have seen Black Panther as well. Even the characters that may have turned in Black Panther are still able to flesh out a much bigger world. So I'm curious to see where they take it. But yeah, it's a smart decision. And I think people will be there to support it.
Exactly. I mean, Black Panther, even before the movie came out, people were talking about how deep its roster of talent is. So fortunately, there are a lot of people there who will still, maintain an interesting movie, I believe. And obviously, we're talking about like the best of several bad options. Maybe bad options is the wrong word to use, but nobody wants to see Black Panther 2 without Chadwick Boseman, and unfortunately there's just no ethically sound way to get that to happen, right? Like I don't want to see the Paul Walker recreated version of Chadwick Boseman.
No.
People after the first movie were talking about Letitia Wright as the breakout character. People even back then were saying, is she going to get her own movie? So it seems like it just kind of makes sense. Maybe the timeline has been sped up for really horrible reasons, but Letitia Wright is a genuine star. We haven't talked about. Yeah, we actually should probably talk about that later. That she's so great in Mangrove. I think it's the best option available right now to them. So I'm still curious about this one, and also curious to see how they navigate this, considering how quick the movie has turned around from being something that, for all intents and purposes, was set to star Chadwick. And I think they only delayed production 4 months, and Ryan Coogler apparently is ready for this new version.
Let's hope it goes well.
Yeah. Dave Chappelle took to Instagram to detail his lingering issues with the Chappelle Show.
We're
the iconic Comedy Central series that bears his name. Citing his tumultuous exit, Chappelle discussed how he was never paid for much of his work. The show has been available to stream through Netflix, but it bothered Chappelle so much that he talked to Netflix and asked them to remove the series, to which Netflix agreed. Art, yay or nay? Is Netflix doing the right thing by listening to Dave Chappelle?
I believe so. We all can't act. Okay, so the first thing I got to bring up, because I saw this going up online. He first brought this up last couple weeks ago when he hosted SNL, and he had said, my show is playing here, because he had brought up, the joke was he had brought up his grandpa or great grandpa who was a slave, and he didn't have much rights, but if he looked at his great great grandchild today who had an HBO show, who's got his Netflix show, he would look at him and be like, wow, you're not getting paid a dime from that, so you have it worse than I did. So that was the first time he had mentioned it. And most recently he came out, and I know, because he's still been doing shows, he came out and he said, y'all know that I left way back when because they weren't treating me right. You guys know this. You embraced me back because of it.
Very public story.
People have been coming out saying, oh, so he signed a contract and now he doesn't. Zach, you better answer that one right there. There is an answer to that question. Y'all really acting like it was in 2006 written into the contract what the streaming services were. Oh, wait, he left in 2006 because whatever was in the contract he didn't agree with. So they're still using it. So it's like, I don't understand that mentality of it. I don't understand bootlicking for Comedy Central, who was screwing him over. Like, are you a fan of him or not? Trust me, I am really big on the people who have used contracts, know what's in it, and then want to switch it up later. Trust me. Dave Chappelle's entire wiki page has a whole thing about that. So it's like, if there's ever been one person who's been really big on a show that has his name and he's not making a dime off of it, and it's on HBO Max and Netflix right now, he said it in his stand-up special. He said, I'm coming to my true bosses. You, the people, you decide. And I think Netflix did well because they have a deal with him. And I like that. I really do like that. They know that if they want to continue business with him, respect it. Take it off of that.
I'm not so sure that lady agrees with you there, though.
She wants to see Chappelle Show. She's like, no, don't take it out. Don't take it out. I like streaming.
I haven't caught up on season 2 yet.
Oh, yeah. We were rewatching it too, but yeah.
Well, okay, so I do think this issue talks about two of like our favorite subjects to bring up. First of all, this is ultimately business for Netflix, right?
Yep.
They are in the Dave Chappelle business, and I think something that this tells me is that they value getting continued content from Dave Chappelle more than they value the streams they're going to get from people rewatching the Chappelle Show.
Because
they are still in the Dave Chappelle business. They're getting new specials from him all the time. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to me that Netflix values their relationship with Dave Chappelle that much that they're giving up what we know is like something that's very valuable for them. They make they have most of their eyeballs going to people watching older shows like The Office, and so
they understand the power
that's
of
interesting. That's interesting to me. The other aspect that is interesting to me is the subject we talk about of physical media versus streaming, because I don't know if Dave Chappelle being treated poorly on that show means that no one should ever get to see the Clayton Bigsby sketch again.
It's episode 1.
It's a culturally important sketch.
It came back on SNL not too long ago as well. Yeah.
I just think like ultimately, I hope that stuff like this doesn't go away forever. Like, can you put a disclaimer? Can Netflix strike some kind of deal to give him some of the back end as well? I just feel like
they can't.
There's got to be some alternative to like this disappears forever.
Yeah.
And luckily, I've got Chappelle Show DVDs, so that's not the case with this for me. But you know, for some people, and maybe for other shows in the future.
It just came on. It's winter. This would have been a show people were catching up on or watching for the first time. And nothing. Yeah. Look, I love HBO and HBO Max, but nothing compares to Netflix. But at the end of the day, I think it's a smarter decision, and hoping that Netflix is doing it with good graces, because if he ever is able to strike a deal with Comedy Central, whoever owns the show, and he's able to make money from it in the future, then that's when you rehost it. So I think listening to him now is the best possible thing to do.
Yeah. One last story quickly. Netflix began testing a new version of its service in France called Netflix Direct. The company described it as, quote, web-based experience that's the same for everyone who watches it, a real-time service, aka a TV channel. Netflix invented TV. A 24-hour Netflix schedule with upcoming movies listed on it like it's the TV guide, with programming based on what's popular among all Netflix fan subscribers. Art, yay or nay, do you think Netflix will attempt a linear channel at some point in the U.S.?
Yeah. I think, did you hear about their other rollout?
Which one?
They have these little dots, these little circles up at the top. So when you're watching a movie, you can just like click a part of the movie that you like and you can see what all your friends are watching. I think that they're going to roll out a feature where you could just watch the shows and swipe it up like that. And pretty much every other feature that's out there. A story mode, have a fleet mode, have every other mode. Because I think we are at the point where every streaming service is... Every social media service is stealing from each other. So it's only a matter of time before every streaming service is stealing from each other as well. Because they are not the first to do this. When I first got my Shudder account, that's the opening thing it presents you with. 5 different live channels that are going on for the curated content that they have on their thing. They ain't invent a damn thing. Nothing. But this just proves that they need to be making changes. And one of their first things was, we are never going to put ads. Oh, but that's not Netflix over there, this URL where it is ads in between the stuff. So they're just finding different avenues of it. What that speaks business-wise, kind of like we just mentioned with Wonder Woman, all of a sudden being able to be on streaming when it's not, does make me worry on the back end on why they have to make decisions like this. But I am not against free content being available for people, but it's not free, is it? You still have to pay.
Well, I think it's supposed to be part of your Netflix service. So if you pay for Netflix, you get this Netflix Direct.
We're getting into bigger problems now. Who gets to be in the thing if it's not algorithmically based?
Yeah, that's interesting because this is one of the things that's different is apparently this is going to be selected by people, whereas everything else on Netflix, that Netflix shows you rather, is selected by their algorithm. So it does potentially provide them more of an opportunity to hand select movies to kind of put in your face, which, you know, that's not the reason that a lot of people signed up for Netflix, is why I think ultimately this feature is not going to be very popular. But I think the whole reason behind Netflix doing this is they're recognizing one of their problems is not so much people using Netflix, but using Netflix and then leaving Netflix when they decide they don't know what to watch or there's not anything interesting to watch.
Yes.
This gives people a chance to just drop in the way that we used to just like turn on TV. It's like, all right, what's the best thing on?
That's fine.
I think it could work for Netflix if they want to do like several channels. Like you have your Netflix horror channel, your Netflix reality channel, one big Netflix channel with, I don't know, whatever's in the top 10 just feels a little bit repetitive and unnecessary.
You know, you heard about the Spotify stuff, right? Where Spotify is now opening it up for you to be able to get recommended. Because, you know, it was an algorithm based. And now they're like, what if we involved money with it? And your first thought is, well, great. If you don't have enough money to give, then you will not come up in the recommended and the algorithms. And I mean, we're on YouTube. We get that. Turns out it wasn't a payment. It was a cut. It was a royalty program where you are getting cut your royalties if you still want to be able to survive in this algorithm. So what is that going to be for Netflix?
Right.
Is it just going to be the originals? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's about it for Yay or Nay, but a reminder that if you want to hear a subject covered here on Intercut, be an intercutie and send us a question by leaving it in the comments on YouTube, hitting us up on social media at IntercutPod, or by emailing us, intercutpod@gmail.com. We are going to move on to our topic of the week, and this week's topic is Borat subsequent movie film. Sacha Baron Cohen, about a month ago, hit us with a somewhat surprise release of this movie onto Amazon, a follow-up to the 2006 Borat movie, rebringing the character to life under some new circumstances. Art, I know that you not only caught up with this one, but you went back and watched the original Borat in preparation for it. How does the original Borat hold up in 2020?
Zach, I went back before 06. I caught Borat in, what was it, 02, 04? He's been doing this character since he was a side guy. He's got this, and you can catch it on YouTube. It's Borat Goes to the UK, and you see right from the beginning, you know, like people complain about Watchmen. What? The Watchmen graphic novel I read wasn't as political as this show. You didn't read the novel, sir. But if you think that this new Borat is different than the old Borat, you weren't paying attention to the old Borat. Mm-hmm. It is a progression of the character in the most beautiful form. It is, you and I had talked about it, and I'm sure we're going to get into it as well, Sacha Baron Cohen and his stances and his beliefs and stuff. And just that idea of how some people don't realize that they're the butt of the joke. So you kind of have to come back and rephrase it for them. But yeah, overall, I don't think it's as funny as the first one. I think some of the novelty of the first one is a little bit gone, and there's just a more serious element to it as well. I had seen a sketch earlier this week that talked about how, you know, the differences of, like, if you have someone running the country and you don't like how they're running it, well, sometimes it's bad because they're very loud about it. And I just wish we went back to the times when they weren't loud about it. You know, it's not the problems that are going on that's the problem. It's that, you know, someone had mentioned, you know, there will still be people in cages before the fact and after the fact. I was like, all right, wait. That still doesn't solve the problem, you know?
Right.
It's like, it's all optics. And I think he realizes that. And I think he saw that in the character of Borat, which is really a character who's just meant to be as abrasive. And while you think he's the butt of the joke, the reality of it is that he is able to meet people, put their guards down so low because of the way he's coming off. And then they showcase either who they truly are, or even more than that, how they may not stand up for someone who's saying all of this crazy stuff, and does that make you as complicit to it? So it's very interesting that a character like Borat, who we all quote as my wife or very nice, all these crazy things, is a lot deeper to the fact that, or to the point that he even won, what was it, ADL awards? You know, he has been out there using this character and all of his characters, really, from what he's done with Who is America and Bruno, the Dictator, even back to Ali G, characters where there's a lot more social commentary than you think there is at the start.
Yeah, maybe the social commentary was a little subtler in the 2006 Borat,
easily,
or maybe just the volume of our politics right now is a little bit higher. Everything feels a little bit more tense and a little bit more frantic and argumentative, so that when he does skirt on a political issue, back in 2006, it might feel a little bit more like he's alluding to it, whereas in 2020, a lot of this stuff does feel like a very direct attack on some of the things that he finds abhorrent. You're right. And I think that in some ways that's one of the really interesting things about how he's chosen to reattack this material, is in kind of clarifying in a way, like, no, these are the things that I think are wrong. And it's not just it's no longer something that feels like it's just random people in small towns, but it's the establishment, it's the convention, as you mentioned. It's the most powerful people in this country, or the people that surround the most powerful people in this country. So to see the way that he kind of attacks all these unsavory elements to sometimes polite society, I think he talked about it in that ADL speech, the way in which Borat will do something that is racist or sexist or just generally abhorrent, but people will just go along with it out of fear of looking wrong or being impolite, or because they actually agree with some of the stuff. And it's that indifference to that prejudice that is super revealing, that people won't stand up for what we agree is the right thing for whatever reason. I think he does an excellent job of highlighting this throughout the movie. There's that excellent scene that takes in the subsequent film, that excellent scene that takes place in the cake shop, where he just dictates the "Jews will not replace us" line, to which the woman just writes it out without hesitation. And I don't know how much moments like that in the film end up being manipulated by the cutting of it, but there's enough evidence there that shows an underlying element that is very apparent in American society today, is that a lot of people just don't care enough to stand up to something that's disagreeable, or to do the right thing in a public situation like that.
Just get me paid and let's go. You know, he gets a lot of lawsuits, and not everything that he's done is perfect when he captures things. I know. And like this is why I think he had a big reason for coming back and doing this character, is because he saw how many people didn't get the joke. So I think he realized the importance of like coming back and kind of setting it straight. Because early on, a big factor to him, he always said, I don't cut to, I don't want to say the message, but he cuts to the comedy. If it is not funny enough, then he will not release it. And that's what he's always stood by. And I think that sometimes he finds the balance in like, where is their commentary happening, while at the same time it being, you know, funny, where it's like, as funny as Jackass, where you're seeing just something goofy happen on screen or somebody's reaction or how they go along with it. I did like the story. I really like how he's fleshing out the world of Borat, and where in the first one, he's evolved from it, and you're bringing back either the pastimes that he had in the first one, but also kind of like the country in and of itself. And you and I talked about all the little behind the scenes that I think really make the character interesting. For example, he never speaks Kazakh. He doesn't even film in Kazakhstan. He films in Romania, which I believe in the future he's going to kind of implement something there where... he's very good at belittling America, but I think he's going to realize, all right, I got to give Kazakhstan their due credit and go at Uzbekistan or the other one that I know he really wants to belittle. But he does things like he is never speaking Kazakh. Yeah. He's speaking Hebrew.
He speaks a mixture of some Eastern European languages and then Hebrew, like the very famous Yakshimash is something that I've been saying with my family almost my entire life, because Yakshimash is how are you doing in Polish. It's like... It's really funny in the ways that he's able to that also highlights the ignorance of the many Americans that he's interacting with, that they don't know any better from whether that's how he talks to how he looks to how he acts, how they assume that that's just could be a normal thing for a foreigner to do, and again speaks to, I don't know how much of that is politeness and how much of that is xenophobia, but it's certainly a mixture of the two. I agree with you, though, that he's able to find the comedy in a lot of these things, and it is comedy first. It's not a movie that's beating you over the head with its message. There's just so many funny situations that he finds himself in, and there's no one who is more daring at going to uncomfortable places with people than Sacha Baron Cohen. Some of the stunts that he pulls in this movie are hard to watch. They give you that cringe factor, but he's such an expert at it that I think it transcends uncomfortable. It transcends the uncomfortable to someplace hilarious and worth celebrating. How that he can manipulate reality in this way, and I think one of the things that really helps it along the way is that he's got a great partner along with him. In the last film, it was his producer, who was also very excellent. This time they have the actress Maria Bakalova, who is so funny playing Borat's daughter in this, and just goes to every place with him, beat for beat. She doesn't miss a step. So I think she was one of the secret weapons of this movie. Yeah,
they should have brought back the producer, man. What they did with him. I know they ended up not bringing him back, and he was great because he too, while he was speaking Hebrew, he was speaking back in, I want to say it was like Arabic. So it's like, on top of that, remember, Borat came out in 2006. You know what came out in 2004? Passion of the Christ. A little Mel Gibson film where they spoke a foreign language, but it wasn't Hebrew, it was Latin because he thought it sounded cool. He was just following up on that joke that it's like, you guys aren't going to get it. But while I'm doing all this racist stuff over here, all these Jew jokes, if you're actually Jewish, you know exactly what I'm saying. And I think it's genius. I think he does a great job of just setting up these moments. And like you mentioned, I know one of the biggest ones that leaked, several things leaked leading up to the second one. I know you were catching John Wilson, the John Wilson show over on HBO.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you noticed the little appearance that he makes there at one point in one of the earlier episodes when he's in New York. But I know the rally one leaked a little bit. The convention one leaked, but no one then actually knew that it was him in there.
Right.
But the biggest one was the Giuliani bit, which is hysterical because you would think that that's the worst thing. You would have thought that was the worst thing Giuliani would have got himself up with, but this man had his Just for Men leaking.
Only got worse for Giuliani from there.
Oh, bless his soul. That ain't even political there. It's like, some of y'all need 10 years to look back at these things that we're going through right now, and then you'll be able to laugh at the craziness of it. But, dear Lord. That scene was
Is that
crazy.
The stunt that you're maybe most impressed by in the movie?
Because it's like, when I first saw it, I was like, he's going for it. And then he cuts it off a little bit sooner. And I'm saying this because I feel most people have seen it, and you probably saw it without even seeing the movie because it was everywhere.
It isn't quite as indicting as it potentially could have been. I think a lot of, it kind of feels like 5 more seconds and it could have gotten a lot worse.
He mentioned the legality of it and how he was technically hiding in a room and he needed to come out because the moment it becomes anything more than that, he can get prosecuted. He cannot release that. He had mentioned previously, he had gotten stuff on camera that never made it to, I believe it was Bruno, where he straight up went to somebody in Las Vegas and said, I need a body to hide. Oh, yeah, I can get you. There's a yacht that really helps out. I also need like a boy, probably this tall, to do like things with. Here's the number. He took that to the FBI because I can't make it in the show. The FBI said, it's okay.
Interesting.
And a lot of people saw the Giuliani bit. Said it's okay. Let that man come out and talk of the Four Seasons. But it's enough, though.
Yeah,
it's enough, though.
Yeah, it's enough that it also just that he would get in a room with these characters is a huge indictment of his character. But I think Giuliani has done enough to discredit himself that, to me, that's not the thing that I'm most impressed by. To me, the performance at the rally, where he's getting all these people to sing along to these absolutely vile ideas, is just
guns.
It is crazy to me. That is a mind-blowing moment to me. And it's one that I saw on Twitter months ahead of time and thought this is going to make for an amazing scene in some film. And I was not expecting it when it came in this movie. Absolutely stunned by it.
Mm-hmm. Shout out him, but shout out Isla Fisher for allowing him to do this, Oh,
I could not be married to that. No.
Yeah. But no, he does a lot of great stuff, a lot of the behind the scenes, One of my favorite ones is this cheese joke that he does in the first Borat, where he just goes down the aisle and he goes, what is this cheese? What is this cheese? He does it for the entirety of the thing, then starts up on the other one. It's saying so much because in and of itself, that is funny. But remember, he comes from Kazakhstan. They don't even have cheese unless they make it themselves. So the fact that as Americans, we have all this choice, it's like what he's really pounding in, it's very smart. Even though it's coming off of what seems like the dumbest character you've ever seen on screen, but that's the genius of what he does.
Yeah. I think for me, the best scene was probably the scene at the Women's Health Center, or like the abortion scene. If that's
you don't even know what to call it, do you?
Yeah, it is so uncomfortable, but it's so revealing and so funny at the same time. And it's also just a classic, like, he's able to get the double meaning to say so much by the use of that like tiny plastic baby that she swallows in the turns of phrase in order to make that conversation as uncomfortable as possible is so funny to me.
Mm-hmm. I am curious to see what if he were to ever follow up this character again, or even his other stuff, because everything I just see as a part of him, all these different characters that he plays for the different shows. I want to see him take on heavier targets, because I feel like the people who he approaches, they're pretty easy. But I'm curious to see him take that Get Out approach. I'm curious. I don't know if you ever finished season 2 of The Boys, but there's a lot of other stuff he could cover as well. And I would love to see him do it, because right now, I know a big part of him is he calls them the Silicon Six and he hates them.
Yeah,
and there,
it'd be very cool to see him do like a Social Network movie kind of thing. Yeah.
So that would be fantastic.
I mean, he's a brilliant creator and certainly one of the bravest voices in comedy right now. So I think it'd be a shame if we don't get some more material from him. I feel like it's been a while since we've gotten a big project from him like this. Mm-hmm. So I was just thankful to have Sacha Baron Cohen back in some capacity.
It's very nice.
Yeah. Does the movie feel any differently to you now that we have maybe even like a little bit of political distance from the Trump era, even though we're still in the Trump era?
Yes, because he barely brings up Bush a couple times, but they were more like Bush jokes,
Yeah.
And again, that goes back to what I was saying. It's like, I can't remember what it was. Again, that sketch that I was mentioning to you, I found it hilarious because it's like, under a certain president, you're okay, but a different president changes, and it's like, oh, this one's a little too loud. But I like what we're doing just in the background. But I mean, it was funny to see how he was able to incorporate things like he pooped at the Trump Tower, but he was ahead of it. But yeah, it definitely was more political. And I think he came out and he said that for the New York Times, where he's like, yo, there is a divide. I think he realized a lot of his fans who like Borat politically think a certain way. And he was like, I want to make sure I'm not attributing to this. And especially with his indictment, again, of the Silicon Six, Twitter and Facebook and all of them. If he feels that way for them, then I'm sure, and knowing how powerful art is, he knows and understands the medium and how it can move people. I think that's why he doubled down to kind of like showcase, hey, for those of you who like Borat for the wrong reasons, know that even a character like Borat can change. And if a character like Borat can change, then so can you.
Yeah, you had a funny comparison. We were talking about this off of recording to the Eminem line in the sand, but maybe a more successful version of that. I think that is a brave thing to do in and of itself, and one that I think he recognized he had the ability to potentially be effective or have some kind of impact with. So Cool. We like a lot about Borat's subsequent movie film. Even I think it definitely felt like it was very urgent when it was released, and maybe now it can also just be appreciated as a very funny movie. But yeah, I'm eager to see what people who watch us also thought of that movie, and especially that movie right now. So let us know in the comments below. We're going to finish this up with the new to see, where we give you our picks for the week. Art, what do you recommend that the people at home catch?
I mean, we hyped up two pretty good ones, The Climb and The Nest. If you have the chance to rent them and they pique your interest, check them out. I know a lot of people have been a little bit lower on The Nest because they think it's slower. At least give it a chance on streaming, but I think both of them are worth the rent for The Climb and The Nest. But if you wanted something that's at home to stream, we covered these two on the LMA streams. If you have Hoopla, and I believe they may even be on Hulu as well, I would highly recommend two very interesting docs. The Donut King, which talks about this Cambodian immigrant who came over to the West Coast, and he invented things that to this day we use. The pink box of donuts, right? That everybody knows because it comes in that pink box. We've seen it in shows. We've seen it everywhere. That man was just saving money, and that's why he got that. So it's like all these interesting things that he did as he was building up his business and how he was able to help other Cambodian immigrants. And then the capitalist side of it comes in and all of the other stuff that he has to go through. I think it was a fascinating doc that came out of South by. Definitely check that one out, as well as another really fun doc that came out of South by from last year called Who Let the Dogs Out. That's also streaming about the song Who Let the Dogs Out, the influences, who actually let them out, but who may have written the song. It deals a lot with intellectual property and the such, and I found it to be very fascinating. It's a pretty short watch based on a U.S. tour that was done by this guy who pretty much does an hour presentation breaking down Who Let the Dogs Out. So I found it to be fascinating. So those are pretty solid movies to catch out there on streaming or to rent on demand.
I have a movie that I caught way back at Sundance 2019, which is available, I believe, on VOD
5 years ago.
Divino, Amor, Divine Love. It's a Brazilian movie directed by Gabriel Mascaro. A very interesting film that takes place in a somewhat not too distant future version of Brazil, where society has become like ultra religious. It's invaded various forms of the government. Our main character is somebody who works in the births, deaths, and marriages department of the government, trying to convince couples from getting a divorce. And there's all these just different aspects of society that you see as slightly manipulated, slightly changed, because they're in this future hyper-religious society. She goes, for example, to talk to her pastor at a drive-through church, which, I know there are things like that, but this is the vision of it. It's really cool. I don't know. There's a really awesome vision here that the director gets at. Plus, it's got this neon-soaked lighting that's very pretty. I think this is a really interesting movie. It's a bit of a thinker, and it has a very patient pace to it. Okay. But it's a very interesting theme. If that sounds interesting to you, I'd highly recommend that. And then Amazon. We got to talk about the Small Axe Anthology.
That deserves a whole video, man. We're still missing two.
Yeah, so we will talk about this more, I'm sure, in upcoming weeks. But Mangrove has already premiered. By the time this episode is out, Lovers Rock will have premiered. Two excellent movies from the man, Steve McQueen. You know we love Steve McQueen on this podcast. And he is giving us 5 movies in 5 weeks through Amazon. How can you ask for more? Let's talk a little bit about Mangrove first, because it's a really interesting movie that talks about this incident that happened in England based on a true story about this mangrove cafe that was targeted by police, and ultimately the people involved who were brought on trial for charges of disturbing the peace. It's this really interesting movie that's like a civil rights drama mixed with a courtroom drama. You have excellent performances, as I mentioned before. Letitia Wright is a spark plug in this movie, and is a very different type of character than I think you're used to seeing her do. I like this one a lot. You compared it on the LME stream to Trial of Chicago 7 favorably because I think it just has a much more lived in feel to it.
They're both true stories.
there's an intensity to the courtroom drama there that I think is so well served by this story. I like this one quite a bit. What did you think about Mangrove?
Absolutely. I need to sit with this one again because I started with Lovers Rock, Mangrove, and then ended on the masterpiece that was Red, White, and Blue. So I started noticing even more with each feature that he did, the cinematography and how he's capturing things. And he does it for each one because each one's got a different, sort of vibe. He covers the home life when it comes to Red, White, and Blue. And he's like showing you, this is what the dinner table looks like. This is what we put on top of our dishes. This wallpaper here, it felt like Roma. Like, is this his wallpaper from when he was young?
Right.
He does the same thing in Lovers Rock with the way that the party, with the way that they dance, with the way that the room looks, with setting up everything. In this one, the way he captures the courtroom. Now, in the first half, he's covering the restaurants, for people who want to come and eat food for a particular palate. But it's that second half with the way he captures them going into these courtrooms. I've always felt, this may be more of a tangent, but I still find it goofy that they got people over there wearing wigs to talk about some serious stuff. But the way that he captures this ginormous setting that they're coming in and the sculptures and everything. And then they sit them up there, right? To look down on everyone who's actually looking down on them. I thought was absolutely fantastic and really showcases what they were up against. But like I said, I want to sit with this one again, especially the second half, because while I did prefer it way more to Trial, that's the second half is where I felt it wasn't as strong as the first time around. But again, I haven't sat with this one again.
It becomes a little bit more of like a typical drama once it becomes a courtroom drama. We've seen versions of the courtroom drama before, and while I do think this is a particularly vital one, it's not breaking new ground cinematically, whereas I think Steve McQueen is a director who his take on everyday life is something that's a little bit more unique, I guess. So that might be that juxtaposition you're feeling between the first half of Mangrove and the second half of Mangrove. But let's also talk about Lovers Rock, which is just about the most delightful movie that I've seen in the last couple of months. It's a movie that I want to live inside of because the vibe is just so good. It's been too long since I've been surrounded by music and people, and it's something that I miss desperately and will get back to as soon as I can. But until then, I will just rewatch Lovers Rock because there's just some scenes in this movie that are transportational. The silly game scene where all of the party starts singing along to that song at once. Don't you just want to be in that room with those people?
I don't know how you get Mangrove, then tune in the following week and get Lovers Rock. I personally...
and then flip it back again with Red, White, and Blue the next week.
And I don't even know what the other two are going to be, but yeah, I think you hit it perfectly when you hyped it up to me when you had caught it in New York. I'm not a fan of people dancing in movies. I always think it's really weird. They're doing the little thing. I could think of like Miss America or, even Scarlett Johansson's dancing in Marriage Story. Every animation ends with dancing. I realized watching this movie where they dance the entire time, it's because y'all don't know how to dance. This movie, you're dancing with them. Now, granted, it's you are in the party. They don't play a song, a snippet, you catch it and go. You are at the party with long sequences of them dancing to the music. But it's not just like they're stopping the story for you to dance. During the dance, people are eyeing each other. During the dance, other things are happening. People are leaving. People are connecting. But they're also dancing like I've never seen in other movies before. And that is what sells it. It is the music. It is the cinematography. It is these characters who are literally there to have a great time. And it takes place in one day, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I love that it starts before the party as you see them setting it up. You see them moving couches and bringing in the boombox. And I love that little coda at the end where you see them go home, where you see them climb into bed again. That last shot was just so perfect. It's a very, very fun movie. Even if there are maybe like a couple moments where it gets intense, I feel like that's a thing that happens at parties, like that parties have a little bit of like an up and down nature to them. And it's all reflected in this movie, which I found to be beautiful. And
when you take the small acts part of it and look at it as a series, they're all having a great time, but a character goes out, sees a couple people and goes, we're still in the world.
And then it centers you back
and it centers you back into the movie. But I like that. I really like what he covered in this film and just all the joy that was captured on screen.
Yeah.
Simply put.
So we'll talk a little bit more about Red, White, and Blue, as well as the other two parts of Small Axe in the coming weeks on Intercut. But suffice to say, we're definitely going to recommend it.
It's
a new
Steve
movie from Steve
McQueen.
Yeah. But that's about all for this week's show. So you can catch more from me, Zach Shevich, by following me on Twitter, Instagram, or Letterboxd at ZShevich. That's ZSHEV, as in virtual theaters, ICH. Art, where can people find more from you?
You can find me over at LME Explain on Twitter, on YouTube. We've been doing live streams over there, so we have even more what we've been watching because we know there's so much. So we've been practically every Monday going through the Letterboxd stuff and just listing everything that's coming out on a weekly basis. And as you know, over here on Intercut, we try to hit up all the festivals and stuff to get you even early stuff, but just trying to get as many movies on your radar as possible. So catch me over on LME Explain, or catch me here every week on the Intercut Podcast.
You can listen to every episode of the Intercut Podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, or your favorite podcatcher. I like Overcast. And then make sure you subscribe not just to the audio feed, but to the video feed as well on youtube.com/IntercutPod, where you can watch our bright, smiling faces as we break down the latest in entertainment. Find new episodes of Intercut every Friday. And please leave a comment, like the video. Consider heading over to iTunes to give us that 5-star review. Shout out to our listeners in Great Britain and Portugal for putting us on the TV and film podcast charts out there. Like our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages. All of them are at IntercutPod to get updates throughout the week from Art, from me, from all the guests that we feature here on Intercut. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, Yakshimash.